Howdy, folks. Welcome back or welcome aboard. You are listening to the Doc Owen Show. We are glad you are here. We have an excellent show for you tonight. A very down-to-earth interview, which we like to call Conversations on the Doc Owen Show, with a young man by the name of Chip Roy, who happens to be running in a runoff election to become the Republican candidate for Congressional District number 21 in the state of Texas. Now, for those of you not in the state of Texas and not in Congressional District 21, this is still of interest to you because of the way the game is played and the things that can be learned when you listen to a professional. Not me, Mr. Roy. Okay, so that's kind of our feature event for the evening. We've not had a special guest on for a while because of all of the local politics that we've been staying out of, but this is one we felt like we would wade into. I am joined in the Hilltop Studios by...
I'm Monsieur Fire.
And...
Uncle Bocce.
Full house, ready to rock and roll.
That's right.
Other than Mr. Roy, we've got several things that need discussing, some of them on a local basis. Again, for our audience around the world, listen. It's one of those listen and learn things. In other words, I don't view any particular element of the world in isolation. That would be absolutely foolish. We are no longer in silos. So things that happen here also happen elsewhere. Maybe not exactly the same, but in a similar fashion.
That's right.
Maybe not as large, but maybe even bigger.
Yeah.
We're the 7th largest city in the country. That means there are 6 other cities bigger that may have some of the same sort of nonsense going on and have a hard time dealing with it or whatever. So when you hear I really don't consider it local news. I implore you to take the information that we're giving you and transpose that information and those elements and those events and things like that into your life, into your town, no matter how large or small it is, because it's critically important that we play the game correctly at every level. And by play the game correctly, I mean in the essence of our founding fathers' Constitution, Christianity and what they now call conservative, which I think is really a nasty term. We are simply Christian constitutionalists, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness type people.
That's right.
That's all there is to it. To say that I'm a conservative, I find insulting. I mean, I guess I'd rather be called a conservative than a nut job.
There you go.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is the people calling me conservative. That's what I call them. Anyway, we always start the show. Can I do the thing about the Doc Owen Show and where we are and where we can be found? Can you guys hold on to what you were going to say?
Sure
I
can.
think so. I think so.
Go ahead.
DocOwenShow. That's how you find us everywhere. We are Doc Owen Show on Facebook. We are at Doc Owen Show on Twitter. We are Doc Owen Show on Instagram, on Pinterest. Every place we go, we are Doc Owen Show. We have a DocOwenShow.com blog, which is where Uncle Bocce stores the archives that make up the historical piece of the show. And we have free apps for both iPhone and Android devices. And that's how you find it there, Doc Owen Show. I mean, we're very consistent about how we do it, and it's always spelled the same way, DocOwenShow. So there you go. There's our self-advertising for the evening. Yay. Find us, like us, spread the word, get it out there. We're on every internet network for radios and podcasting, almost every one that there is, and certainly all of the major ones, including things like iHeart and, really broadened the horizon. So we can be found.
That's true.
We start after that point of self-advertising, we start the show in a very traditional manner, and that kicks off the normal routine. Ms. Surefire gives us an inspirational quote. Uncle Botsy gives us a brief snippet of this day in history at some point in time. And I finish out the three-way with something about leadership. Mm-hmm. And then we dive into it. Ms. Surefire, take it away.
And tonight's quote, as usual, comes from PassItOn.com.
Pass it on.
That's right.
Pass
So I'm
it
just
on, pass it on.
passing it on.
There you go.
That's right. And tonight's quote comes from somebody that most of us have heard of. His pen name was Mark Twain.
Oh, yeah.
But his real name was Samuel.
Don't give away. No. Go ahead. Just tease me.
All you have to do is Google it. It was Samuel Langhorne Clemens. So I could see why he changed to Mark
There
Twain.
you go.
Yeah,
That's right.
That's true. And he was an American writer, humorist, and lecturer.
Yes, he was.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
he was.
And his quote was, "The two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why."
That's Mark Twain.
Thought she was going to say, "In the day you die," right?
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
I like it.
Very good. That's a good one.
I remember that. Yeah, he's right up there with Dr. Zeus as far as I'm concerned in terms of wisdom
That's true.
and how he puts it out there. Good job. Thank you very much. Uncle Botsy,
Okay.
anything interesting go on in the past?
Well, yeah, I guess. One of them is very important. Well, they're both, I have two.
Okay.
Okay. In 1769, Washington rose up to criticize taxation without representation.
Ooh.
But you know how much
That sounds
England
familiar.
was trying to control them and tax them and all that kind of thing.
Yep.
So he came out against that. And then there was, in 1954, the Supreme Court decided on Brown versus the Board of Education.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And that was basically saying that segregation in public schools is unconstitutional. That's what they declared.
Correct.
Yeah. Why did it take so many years for the schools to get desegregated? But we'll talk about that another day.
I'm sure we will. 1954.
Yeah, yeah. Not that long ago.
That's true.
Thank
All
you
those
for
years.
saying that. Okay. My quote comes from a book called God Bless America, Prayers and Reflections for Our Country. We've kind of switched over to the biblical side
That's
of
good.
references. This one is from Proverbs 21:1. Think about this in terms of our current leadership. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. He directs it like a water course wherever he pleases.
Unless you rebel.
Pardon me?
Unless you rebel.
Okay, what do you mean? What do you mean
Unless you don't accept the concept of
Christianity?
Christianity
of the
or
Lord
Christ
and God and all of that?
and, and guiding you and stuff like that, yes. Something like, who was it? Barack Obama? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, so
I don't think the Lord had anything to do with any of the crap that he gave us.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I would disagree with you. It's based on one of my favorite phrases that he works in very strange ways.
True.
And so
That is true.
He's got to show us the bad side from time to time, so that the heart of the good will be energized.
You're right.
To defeat and stand it off.
I agree.
You follow me? If not, we get complacent and think everybody's like us, and they're not.
That's true.
So, but I understand where you're coming from, but there are of course are deniers. And
But little do they know that that God is using them to do something like what you just said,
yes.
to wake us up.
Yes.
So I go
Yeah.
along with that.
Okay. So I've already said something about who our special guest is going to be. It's a Mr. Chris Roy. I think you will find the conversation that we have with him is very interesting. It is typical of a Doc Owen show conversation. It is a little bit off of the beaten path to try to give you some insight into the man, not just talking points and me asking, about talking points, etc. Although Chip knows his stuff, and I think you will find that out very quickly. And then after that, we're going to talk about a new concept. Last week we did a show called Millennials, Who Cares? I think was the name of the show.
That's right.
And it's been an ongoing point of questioning coming out of the Doc Owen show. So we may, if we have time, after we hear from Uncle Bocce and Chip, we'll discuss some ideas that are floating around the Doc Owen show dinner table in terms of millennials.
Yes.
And how best to deal with this group that continues to come out of high school and college. Fair enough?
Yeah.
Uncle Bocce,
Yes, sir.
you have the stage,
Thank you.
as the saying goes.
Okay, this is the second episode of Andrew Johnson.
Andrew Johnson.
This Johnson.
Not Jackson.
Johnson.
Johnson.
Exactly.
Right.
And he was our 17th president, becoming president because Abraham Lincoln was taken away from us.
Was our 16th president.
The primary issue at the time was Reconstruction. Now remember, Lincoln wanted a forgiving Reconstruction.
Yes.
He didn't want to push the South away. He wanted to incorporate them in a very friendly and a manner.
Well, and that's really that's nothing new. And here's why I'm bringing it up, because and we got to keep hammering the point to the audience so the audience can go forth and hammer it to their friends.
Right.
This was not a war over slavery.
That's correct.
It was a war about saving the Union.
Absolutely.
And keeping the United States of America together and not allowing folks to pull out. We can disagree, but you don't pull out.
Right.
And so his idea of Reconstruction was nothing more than implementing the reason he started the war in the first place.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know
mean,
exactly. You're absolutely right.
So
Andrew Johnson was sworn in right after Abraham Lincoln's assassination.
he was the vice president.
He was the vice president.
Yeah,
yes.
that would be, standard operating procedure.
So he took the oath of office and all that. Now, something I said before. Lincoln chose Johnson,
Yep.
who is or was a racist
Yep.
and uneducated Southerner from Tennessee. He did that because he wanted to balance the ticket. Okay? Now, we know that happens, and it's happened throughout United States history. However, the Constitution is totally silent on the concept of picking a running mate just to balance the ticket rather than somebody who's ideologically on your level. But that's an argument for another day.
It's not a constitutional concern.
Yeah, it's not a constitutional concern. Exactly. It's not.
Doesn't need to be.
No, doesn't need to be, right? But, okay. Johnson didn't like the terms of the surrender. He wanted more egregious terms. So he...
Against the South?
yeah.
He was a Southerner.
Who?
Johnson.
He was from Tennessee, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Well, what he agreed to is a union with Union General William Tecumseh Sherman and the Confederate General Joseph E. Johnston are too lenient to the Confederates and orders that they be set aside. So he didn't like the way that they were going to. So Johnston eventually surrenders. Johnston, that's the general. He surrenders to Sherman on April 26th on harsher terms. Okay, arresting Confederates. Johnson issues a proclamation, actually, offering rewards for the arrest of Jefferson Davis, Jacob Thompson, and Clement C. Clay. Now, we all know who Jefferson Davis is. The other two, we're not sure. But he wanted them absolutely arrested as enemies of the state. Now, the next thing that happened is the southern states began to pass something called black codes.
Okay.
Okay? And that was an attempt to restrict the newly won rights of African Americans and attempts to keep the freedman in a separate and inferior position. So the states, the southern states were doing that. Mississippi and South Carolina were the harshest, but eventually all of them, all of the ex-Confederate states, followed suit. Okay. Then Johnson denounces what he called radical Republicans. Where have we heard that before? Yeah. Congress attempted to expand the Freedmen's Bureau, which really was set up, was only supposed to be in for a year, to help the poor whites and the blacks, the ex-slaves, to get back into their lives, you know, to help them get along. So Johnson was not really very happy with that. And there's certain senators and whatever that he was really... The radicals were a minority within the party of the Republicans. They believed that few white Southerners were actually Unionists. So, you know, they had their own slant on ideas. They worked assiduously, hoping to improve the lot of the freedmen and trying to bar former Confederate leaders from politics. See where this is going?
No, I don't.
It's building? Okay, well, we'll get there. Then Johnson, remember, they called him Servito, which was...
right.
Okay, here's one of the reasons. He vetoed the Civil Rights Act, which came after the Freedmen Bureau.
Right.
Okay, he vetoed it because he just didn't think that he thought that was an attempt to provide freedmen with federal citizenship, and he didn't think that was a good thing because of the failed freedmen. The act sanctions the employment of federal troops for enforcement, but the Senate overrode his veto, and the House of Representatives followed suit. So that Civil Rights Act went into effect.
Okay.
Then the biggie was the 14th Amendment. Okay. The Congress was very unhappy with Johnson's lenient approach. They call it a lenient approach to the South. So they passed the 14th Amendment to the Constitution and gave it to the states for ratification. It was ratified. And it sought to prevent ex-Confederates from holding office. Not something I didn't know.
Huh.
I didn't know that was part of the 14th Amendment. It also establishes the citizenship of African Americans, affirming that all persons born, naturalized in the United, and so on as it goes. Okay? The amendment passed, and it overturned the Dred Scott decision in 1857. You know, that was the Board of Education against Dred Scott.
Right.
Okay. Johnson then suffers a lot of congressional losses. The Republicans gain a lot more power in Congress. And then they passed the first Reconstruction Act, which Johnson, of course, vetoed, and they passed it over his objections. Then there was another second Reconstruction Act, which he vetoed, but they overrode it. Seward, who was he was Secretary of State, he did that thing with Alaska, Seward's icebox. So that happened. Yeah, that happened. And then the third Reconstruction Act was overridden again. He vetoed it, but
the
Congress passed it.
Okay,
overrode it.
Where are you close to?
Yeah, I should be
taking a break.
Finished. Yeah.
Okay. I got a question for you. So let me back me up to the big picture. Mm-hmm. All right. You know, what we had a Congress that really was more ideologically in tune with Abraham Lincoln.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And not with his vice president who wound up taking over.
Right.
So Congress actually kind of implemented what they had obviously discussed or learned or agreed to with Abraham Lincoln before he was shot.
Correct.
Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, pretty
Okay.
much. So that was the
Okay. And so the war was fought not necessarily to free the slaves. The war was fought for, I think, for economic reasons as well as keeping the Union together, which was also
Correct.
a part of the economic reasons. And so after the fact, Congress wanted to put the country back together. But as a part of that, freeing the slaves in the South, and I think that's important too.
Right.
It's my understanding that they only freed the slaves in the South.
That's correct.
That the
the
slaves
13th Amendment, right?
that were in the North were left alone. They were still slaves.
Right.
Strange, very strange.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a really tough period in this country's life to figure out, and probably very delicate to keep war from not breaking out all over again.
Yeah.
I mean, I bet you those things were just that contentious.
Yeah, well, the contentious part of it was the difference between the philosophy of Abraham Lincoln and the Republican Party, which was formed because of anti-slavery, to Johnson, who was a Democrat, a Southern Democrat, who favored, bad race relations and all that.
That's the point that I was trying to help bring out.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, the question of why did Lincoln pick him? Anyway, so he goes before the Congress.
Could have something to do with the same reason Trump picks who he does. Exposure.
Well, yeah. Yeah, okay.
Exposure to calling into it once and for all.
Okay.
Set up for the fall.
So
people who think strategically at that level are way out there. 10, 25, 30, 40 years. They're making decisions that they know will have an impact that far out.
So anyway, the Congress tried to impeach him. He did get impeached in the House, but the Senate, he did not convict him by one vote.
Okay.
So he stayed in office. He vetoes a bunch of other things.
No cigar.
Yeah. Let's see here. Just a few. His personality type, he was a character traits of President Andrew Johnson can be described as reserved, direct, polite, and determined. I think they're being really nice. He did not own any slaves when he was president, but he did have 8 slaves prior to that. Yeah, and here's one of his quotes that I'll close on.
Now they call him staff.
Yeah.
He wanted
Okay.
dysfunction.
All right. Honest conviction is my courage. The Constitution is my guide. So
That was a true cough. That wasn't
that was
a
a
theatrical cough.
that was not
No,
theatrical.
that was for real. For the real.
Yeah.
So-
And he also said, if I am shot at, I want no man to be in the way of the bullet. Imagine that. He'd rather be dead than be saved.
Take it yourself.
Anyway, so that was Johnson, and he set the mode for race relations from that point on.
What do you mean the mode? The tone?
The tone.
Okay.
I should have said, yeah.
Okay. And it wasn't pretty.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't, because after this, some really, really bad things happened.
Yeah, which I'm sure we're going to hear about.
We're going to hear about. Not tonight, but you're going to hear about.
Right. And so I think that turning point, as our old friend Dinesh D'Souza said in the movie and in the conversations that we've had with him, do not be fooled by which party has forever been on which side of the racist conversation. Plain and simple.
Plain and simple.
And this is right at the kind of the vortex, the V of where where it split off and headed down that path. And nothing has changed.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed.
No, nothing has changed.
The media stories about it have changed. The party line that they speak has changed, but the proof is in the pudding, as we say, and nothing has changed about the way they actually deal with it.
That's right.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So,
I am Uncle Bachi. Reach me at unclebaci at docowenshow.com. And if you have any comments about anything I said tonight, I'd be happy to hear from you.
Thank you, Uncle Bachi.
bring it on. Good job, Uncle Bachi.
Okay.
So,
Go.
let's do this. Let's dive right into Chip Roy.
Good.
Okay. I'll give. I don't think I need to give you much background. I'd rather that you listen to the conversation with Mr. Roy, and then if I need to fill in any of the blanks, I'll do it on the backside. Okay.
Sounds good.
He tells his own story. Allow me to introduce Mr. Chip Roy. Hit the magic twinger. Boom. Say hello.
Doc, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate what you do for helping spread the word and build a conservative group following in the next generation of Americans. We need to do that, and so thank you for doing it. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, my name Chip. It's a nickname I've had since I was a little guy. My parents named me Charles. It's a family name that dates back to early days of my family. In fact, my family came to Texas in the 1840s,
Wow.
and my family. The name Charles has popped up a number of generations, and so that's mine. My son's name is Charles. We call him Charlie, and I go by Chip, and that's how we roll.
Well, my uncle was named Charles. My brother's named after him, who goes by Charlie, and then his son is also a Charles, but we call him Chuck. So, you have to kind of, and so maybe the next generation will be a Chip, and then we'll go back to Charles, and, it'll all balance out. So I understand where you're coming
Well, we got all our bases covered.
from. Yeah. Whereabouts in Texas are you from originally?
Well, so as I said, my family came to Hayes County in the 1840s, and in fact, my great-great-great-grandparents, I didn't know this till recently, are buried on a ranch about a few miles down the road from my property in Hayes County. I just talked to the ranch owner recently I just talked to the ranch owner just this last week, and she's going to let us go on. There's an old beat-up cemetery, it's an old family cemetery, and we're going to talk to her. We're going to kind of spruce it up a little bit. It's pretty neat.
That's really cool. So now you know what the draw was for you to buy the property that you did.
That's right. The good Lord works.
It works in very, very strange ways. Good for you.
That's right. Well,
that gave me goosebumps. I like that kind of stuff. That's cool.
Yeah, me too. The history's neat, and you know what it took for the settlers who came out to Texas in that time frame, and to be out here in the hill country in the 1840s, 50s, 60s, and then my family ended up moving out to West Texas. My dad grew up out there. My grandpa was the chief of police of Sweetwater, Texas, up in Nolan County, and my grandmother. Yeah,
go ahead.
No, well, my grandmother ended up becoming the first woman elected county clerk out there because she found herself a single mom in West Texas when my grandpa passed away of cancer, and my dad was 7 years old and had polio, and what my grandmother was in 1949, 50, 51, and figuring out what to do. So she grabbed herself up by her bootstraps and ran for county clerk. And and won. And I kind of learned from her about politics and how that works and what it means to, stand up and take care of your family and do what's right. And she took care of my dad, and he's 75 years old and still walking, and a tribute to her success and sacrifice. So that's a lot of why I'm interested in public service.
So you come from a long line of seriously hard-headed folks, it sounds like.
That's exactly right. Well, my mama is a Air Force brat. She grew up on Randolph Air Force Base in San Antonio as a kid, and ended up in Bergstrom in Austin, and she met my dad in Austin, and they got married 50 years ago and celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in Austin with us a couple months ago at our church in Austin, which was wonderful.
I'm a firm believer in talking in you guys talking the issues. But I'm also a really firm believer in going through what you just went through. I think it is so important for the voter to know, not just what you say you believe, and you know what I'm saying. I shouldn't say you. What a candidate says they believe. It's also important for me to know who their dad is, who their granddad was, because that's how I can tell. That's such a great story you just laid out there. I don't know whether you've had an opportunity to tell it on the trail or not, but I would highly encourage you to do so, because being personable to me is a real big part of the game that a lot of candidates seem to forget. And the story I get on you is that you don't. You are personable. You are who you say you are, and there's no facade there.
Well, I'm a proud Texan family. I've been here a long time.
Right.
I believe very much in talking and engaging with people as Texans do, but standing your ground and standing for what you believe in. And then that's what I've tried to do my whole life, my whole career. And, I'm also blessed. My parents ended up moving up to Virginia for a few years. And so I ended up growing up in high school, went to Virginia and went to the University of Virginia, which your listeners probably know was founded by Thomas Jefferson. And so
yes, sir.
I got the double blessing that the Lord gave me as a Texan for my heritage for, 170 years of family. And I'm proud to be in Texas, and my children are Texans and born here. My wife did, and she's an Aggie, and we both met at the University of Texas School of Law. But I was blessed to kind of grow up in the cradle of democracy, and my first job was just down the hill from where Patrick Henry gave his "Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death" speech. And when I was in high school, I was able to go down and go to Gettysburg and Harper's Ferry, and I lived in a room built by Thomas Jefferson in college. And that stuff seeps into you and lets you know where we come from.
Absolutely, it does. It gets in your bones, not to mention your brain. And
that's right.
You realize how important it is. And by the way, that was a total stroke of genius on your part to marry an Aggie. I mean, that's well done. And that's from an Aggie that grew up in College Station, Texas. So,
well, having worked for 3 years for Governor Perry, and then marrying an Aggie, I almost can speak the cult language, if you will, but I can't quite.
You can probably come pretty close, and
that's right.
We have a tendency to be a little lenient on the in-laws. You know what I mean?
That's right. That's right.
So this is your first time. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is your first time to run for public office, and you're going to jump out there in the deep end of the pool, and go up to Washington to make a difference. Am I correct?
Well, you're correct that it is my first time to run for office.
Okay.
I have been, as I think you know, I've spent some part of my career working in public service. I was a federal prosecutor, worked for Governor Perry. As I mentioned, I was Senator Cruz's chief of staff.
Right.
I was also the first assistant attorney general for a while. And so I've been in the thick of the fight, fighting to stop amnesty a number of times in the Senate, trying to fight for good judges and trying to fight to defend our voter ID laws and our pro-life anti-abortion laws in Texas. And so I've been there. And, when Congressman Smith announced, I had thought over the years, thought a little bit about whether I might run, but just leave it in the Lord's hands and wasn't looking for anything. But when Congressman Smith announced, and this is my home and community, and I thought this was an opportunity to go try to fight for the people of Texas at a time when we need it. When we've got a president willing to challenge the status quo and take on Washington, he needs reinforcements, and he needs them immediately. this Congress is refusing to do their job and send in good bills, and we need a Congress that will do that.
I completely agree with you, and I apologize if the way I stated that sounded like a setup, because it really wasn't. It was the fact that I think you have, because of your background and because of all the public service and the what we call time and grade that you've done as a, but not as an elected official, has given you a real solid background to know what needs to be done, and not just that, but to know how to do it and how to deal with folks that are not elected, such as those roles that you just mentioned. So on my part, it was more saying I think you're jumping in at the right level.
Well, no, I appreciate that. I didn't interpret that any other way.
Good.
And importantly, we've got to have people who understand where they come from and what they're doing and representing the people back home. And exactly. I think that what we have seen over the last 10 years in particular, since Obama took office, and we saw the reaction by the American people say, enough of what you're doing with the courts, enough of what you're doing with spending. We want to end this earmark train. We want to stop your bloated spending. We want to stop Obamacare. And we've seen the reaction to that with the election of Ted Cruz over David Dewhurst, the election of Mike Lee over Bob Bennett in Utah, or yes, Rand Paul over Trey Grayson in Kentucky, Marco Rubio over Charlie Crist in Florida. These are really, really important changes. And the creation of the House Freedom Caucus and Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows. And look, I'm proud to be endorsed by Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows and Rand Paul and Mike Lee and Ted Cruz. Why?
Oh, yeah.
Because I fought alongside of those guys against the status quo in Washington. And they are begging for reinforcements because they need the numbers to be able to challenge those swamp folks that won't actually do what they say they're going to do, and rather they just give in and capitulate when they're in D.C.
Oh, you noticed that too.
Well, it's even worse. It's worse than that they campaign on one thing and do another. It's worse than that.
Yes, sir,
they look you in the eye.
Yep.
They look you in the eye and they tell you that they're doing one thing when they're doing the exact opposite at that moment, and that is unconscionable.
I agree with you. I guess it's our, I hate to say it's our Texas background, because you would hope that every other state in the union would have similar culture and similar pride and similar integrity. But I don't think they do. I don't think they ever have. And so, that's the challenge, is the folks like yourself and all of those names that you just mentioned, instead of being an occasional rock star, we need to put the momentum in where it's a solid group that is just literally not to be messed with for quite some time. We need some protection for we can't turn it over every 4 to 6 to 8 years and have it shifting back and forth. We need a good solid run for a generation at least.
I agree, and I agree. I mean, you think about the great things that have happened over the last 16 months, getting
yes,
second.
Yep.
16 circuit court judges, the United States Supreme Court justice, a tax bill across the line that puts more money in our pockets, getting out of the Clean Power Plan, getting out of the so-called Paris Agreement, ripping apart the regulatory state of the Environmental Protection Agency, which has been overridden by leftists for a long time. These are all great things, but you know what? We've got 1,000 miles to go, and we've only gone a few hundred yards.
Yeah.
And we're just getting started. And let me tell you this, the way you win is you start talking about what you can do instead of what you can't do. I'm so tired of hearing senators in Washington and members of the House hiding behind Senate rules and procedure and telling us what they can't do instead of standing up and leading and figuring out how to win people, win minds and hearts behind competent, good sense, common sense reforms like a balanced budget and like getting us our healthcare freedom back and building a wall and securing our border. These are not complex issues. They're just lacking the willpower to do it.
That's right. I'll give you and the audience a comparison to being in sales. I grew up as a fourth-generation sales guy. And at one time I wanted to do what you're doing for a living, but by the time I got around to doing it, I couldn't stand all of the negativity. I just wasn't, I was too old for the fight. I decided to do it from where I'm doing it. But in sales, I was absolutely amazed at the number of salespeople who were not successful, and they couldn't figure out why. And yet, it was one simple thing that they would ask the prospective buyer, "You don't want to buy my computer, do you?" And that's what you're saying about the negativity. It makes it so easy for the buyer to say, "Oh, you're right, I don't want to." So if they talk negatively, instead of approaching it from a positive perspective, like you're saying, you're going to wind up with negative results. I mean, that's the way it works. So I really appreciate where you're coming from.
No, and I loved your analogy there, and I think that we need more of that in Washington. And just recognize it. Quit making things so complex. And by the way, if you want to get unity in our country, as I know we all want again, where you're able to band together as Americans in firm recognition of our core constitutional values, well, then leave most decision-making to the people and the states as the 10th Amendment calls for, so that we are no longer waiting every November and every time we hear some news from Washington with bated breath about whether or not we're going to be able to live the way we think we ought to live freely. That's the problem. We de-escalate politics by spreading the decision-making back out to the people.
Two things have happened, and you can see if you agree or not, but two things have happened. Number one, the folks that are too many, let's put it that way, I don't want to say majority, but too many of the people up there have been there so long, and they've convinced themselves and their support mechanisms, a lot of times which are lobbyists and money and this and that, have given them so many accolades that they're totally convinced they know more about it than we do, that they're so much smarter. And the other thing that happened when I was growing up, all of the stuff that we see on TV was about Hollywood. So too many politicians have literally taken this rock star mentality upon themselves. And that's kind of a dangerous thing when you then wind up with people like yourself and a friend of mine that I've met, Louis Gohmert, that I'm sure you know, and, the Lamar Smiths and the ones that say, wait a minute, maybe we should ask our constituents what they want to do. You're a scary mechanism when you do that.
That's right. And, of course, I'm proud to be endorsed by both Louis Gohmert and Lamar Smith. It means a lot to me. And I'll tell you this, the old saying is that Washington, D.C. is Hollywood for ugly people. And
I hadn't heard that. I love it.
Yeah. And there's some truth to that. These guys get self-important, and they get to feeling like everybody loves them, everybody's calling them. And, I'll say that in my time, I've been working in and around these guys. These guys put their socks on and they comb their hair and they get up in the morning the same way all of us do. And, my great-grandfather, who lost the farm in the Depression out in Roscoe, out a little west of Sweetwater, and worked the balance of his days. Yeah, well, no, exactly. And he worked the balance of his days as the janitor of the First Baptist Church, but he took care of my grandma and my dad and helped look after them. And they had a good quality of life. And my dad learned a lot from him. And you know what? He's every bit as important in the fabric of our country as is a senator or a congressman. These guys are just human beings who are representing us. And we got to stop treating them any different than that. And that's why I'm running. We shouldn't be treating them differently.
God bless you, man. I am so glad we had this conversation, and I'm doubly glad that we got to record it.
Well, me too, and I appreciate the opportunity to do it, and I appreciate what you do. Really, I can't say enough how important it is.
I appreciate that. It's my method of giving back. That's just all I'll say. We put it out there once a week. I was lucky enough to and with the grace of God, to get a PhD at 63, and I don't figure he gave me that so I could sit on the porch and watch all you fellas just hammer it out. I need to be in the game somehow, and this is how I do it. So,
well, I'll say one last point on that, which is the way we win, and the way we've been winning, is by getting the information to the people and then holding these jokers accountable. We did it when we stopped amnesty, and the American people melted the phones down and mailed bricks in and said, enough with this. We want a wall. And we did it on spending when we made the President Obama sign cut, cap, and balance in 2011. And we can do it going forward if the American people are armed with information. So keep it up and hold these guys accountable and hold me accountable. If I'm fortunate enough to be elected, and you and I work together to make sure we get the information out of Washington, and so the people can have their voice heard.
I will do all I can do to get you there, sir. I look forward to seeing you around the campus sometime.
Well, I appreciate it, sir. Thank you for this time and opportunity. I look forward to visiting.
Thanks, Chip. Go get him, Tiger.
God bless. Bye-bye.
God bless, man. Bye-bye. So, I know that you hear a lot of, if you've listened to other radio shows or you listen to, you read the newspaper or you go to political rallies or debates, as some people like to call them, or whatever, you hear a lot about how a candidate feels about a particular issue. In other words, they're always talking about staying focused on the issues, or bringing up mostly what they're trying to tell you is, if indirectly, which it usually is, they're trying to get you to focus on the issues that they think will help them win. Mm-hmm. All right.
Yep.
Chip Roy, the gentleman you just heard, and my conversation with, is being beaten up because he does not live in the district that he is running for office in. Okay? Mm-hmm. That is his opponent's major issue. He lives just like within 20 feet of the line because they moved the line. You follow me? First of all, let's understand one thing. It's not a requirement. He does not have to live in the district that he's running for, nor does anybody else at a national level. Okay?
Okay.
That's the law. He don't have to live there. But that's beside the point. It's the fact that his opponent is making that the biggest issue. His children go to school in the district. He pays those property taxes in the district. And for 170 years, he's known more about what that district likes, wants, deserves, and needs than anybody else in the game.
There you
It
go.
goes all the way
That's
back
true.
to his parents and his grandparents, and that was the reason I wanted to have that conversation with him.
Yep.
Because that is so important. I wrote a book once, and there was a chapter in it about learn where your candidates are from. Did their parents and their grandparents grow up in your state? Were they born in your state? Or did they move to your state because they saw an opportunity to run for office? So they may live in your district, but they may have only been there for the minimum of 6 months it requires before they can run for office or whatever. The point is, you need to know, how deep does this run? And if it runs as deep as multiple generations, I got a feeling he knows exactly what that neighborhood likes.
Oh, sure.
Or how they feel about certain constitutional issues.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's nonsense to put him down because they moved the line and he's not required by law nor by intent. That's the main thing. His ethics and his integrity are in really good shape.
Amen.
In terms
That's
of doing
true.
what he's doing, and that's the main thing that needs to be taken away from that. So for anybody listening that happens to be a naysayer or questioning his capability because he doesn't live in the district, get your head out.
I think this conversation proved otherwise.
I
I am totally convinced.
I know that
Oh,
it did,
yeah,
and it proved it without me having to bring it up.
Exactly.
That-
Exactly.
That was the
That's
whole.
true.
That was the whole point.
I feel like I know the man personally now.
A new
Yes.
report suggests an intimate inspector general report may rule that the FBI and Justice Department officials broke the law
Of
in
course
their
they did.
handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation.
We all know that.
Well, see, that's
Yeah.
one of the. But that's
I know.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, how old is that story? And that comes into the no bull sugar category. On a local basis, we have we have a new round of politicians in our headquarters, in our city council and our mayor's position, and they are very much doing things as they please in what they call executive sessions. In other words, behind closed doors. The most recent of which that was in national news, I believe, San Antonio declined to bid on the Republican National Convention.
Yeah.
For whatever excuse. The main excuse is everybody down there, most everybody at City Hall is a Democrat. And so, they're all, and one of them even had the cojones to say that if it were anybody besides Trump, he might reconsider.
That's hard.
Now, what is that?
And that other councilman, it was the councilman who said
About the
that
mole?
if they come here, eat the mole because we're going to poison it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Don't-
Yeah, I mean,
horrible.
He said don't
the
eat the mole.
mentality. Yeah, don't eat the mole because it's good. I mean,
I recommend not eating the mole anyway.
what
I'm not crazy
childish.
That's very tacky. Yeah, unprofessional.
about it. It
Childish.
seems that one city councilman, a gentleman by the name of Brockhouse, that some of us on the circuit know,
Greg, yeah,
Greg
I know
Brockhouse,
Greg.
has filed a complaint with District Attorney Nico LaHood, a friend of the show, and the State Attorney General about these closed sessions. And
Good
it
for
seems
him.
that the city government attorney has sent a letter to all the members of council and the mayor to watch their step and to not destroy any evidence, electronic or physical or otherwise, about their deliberation on non-bidding the Republican National Committee convention. It was all done
Good.
behind closed doors, and there is at least one councilman standing up and saying, we're having way too many of these closed door sessions, and we are supposed to have open meetings. At the same time, now this part of the show is where, if you were promised from the beginning, I told you there was going to be some things I was going to bring up that you need to watch for in your hometown, either in the same size or greater magnitude. The other thing that's going on is the firefighters.
Yeah.
The firefighters led a petition drive with Christian and conservative organizations to make the city council accountable, and they've come up with enough signatures on the petition that it must be on the ballot, that everything city council passes must go to a vote before it can be implemented.
Yay.
In other words, have all the closed door
Hold them
sessions you
accountable,
want.
Right?
But you're going to be accountable to us before you get to do anything about it. Well, city council and the mayor are not too crazy about this.
Of course not.
Oh,
But-
yeah. Too bad.
So we'll see it. That's one of those. Stay tuned. And I also promised you we were going to tell you something about millennials and recruiting millennials. But I'm not sure I have enough time because I'm getting the 1 minute mark signal to. So all I can tell you is, back in the day, people had to have their own health insurance. Then the General Motors and the General Electrics and the General Dynamics and the big corporations of the world decided that they could create a competitive advantage by providing free health care to attract better employees. Next week, we will give you an idea of things to do to attract millennials to your workplace.
Oh, yeah.
How's that
sure.
sound?
We got a big old list
We'll have
working on.
we'll have a list of them.
Good.
So for those of you that are employers or in that category, we'll tell you how to get these young people to dedicate themselves to your company and allow you to grow and create a whole new environment with young people on
Awesome.
on the staff.
Can't wait till next week.
It's gonna
But
it's
it
gonna be
benefit the
fun.
employer if you ask
Oh, it
me.
benefits everybody because
Sure,
it gets
yeah.
them, they get what they want. The majority of them like socialism anyway, so I think that they'll like some of our ideas. Front row. Time to go. You have been listening to the Doc Owen Show. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. Now go out there this week and take care, pay attention, and God bless.
Bye-bye, folks. God bless.